The interesting thing is you only see the people who make it. You don't see the musician who couch surfed for 30 years and didn't make it.
Holy crap, they're starting a show? Let me at least check it out, right? Many people want to check it out to see what it's about. Not a lot of people want to stick around.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another very special, as always, episode of Next Level University, where we teach you how to level up your life, your love, your health, and your wealth. We hope you enjoyed our latest episode where we had a live mastermind on the most important habits to find massive success this year in 2021. Today, for episode number 534, we are going to talk to you about why everybody supports you in the beginning of your journey. So, I was on a call recently with somebody, and this is a person who wasn't really leveraging social media, and he started posting like stories and things to social media, and he had a bunch of people reach out. And he's like, yeah, I posted a couple stories, a couple things on my feed, and I had a bunch of people reaching out saying how motivational I was and how much I made them think. And that brought me back to like when I did the same thing.
Yeah.
And I became the motivational, inspirational guy, and a lot of people were reaching out, and how everybody kind of in the beginning is supportive. And then that tends to, this isn't across the board, but that tends to drop off.
Right.
I think the true few will always stick around. Like, I know I've had the true few people who have always been there no matter what, but a lot of people have dropped off, and they go from liking your stuff and commenting on your stuff to kind of being like, who do you think you are? That sort of thing. So we wanted to talk about that today because it's almost like in the beginning, you feel like you're winning.
Right.
And it's also like this for clients because in the very beginning, sometimes it can be, I don't want to say that it's easy to get clients, but you'll get clients by luck and you'll assume that it's that easy for the rest of your career, and you don't necessarily build the skill of sales and influence.
I think one of the things to understand here, and I'll just keep this story anonymous, but I think it's really important. So I know someone who for 13 years was a therapist, really incredible therapist. And she did an online training, and it was the first online training she'd ever done, and it was an incredible success. She had 400 people pay a lot of money, not a lot of money, pay to be a part of her webinar, her training. And what I think I want to make sure the listeners understand here is that you shouldn't just look at that one training, that one online training as oh my God, like that's going to be sustainable. So in this case, it's 400 people, even if it's $100 a piece, that's, $40,000, right? And so, and this is a hypothetical in terms of the money, that side of things. But here's what I want you to realize is it's the 13 years of building incredible relationships. It's the 13 years of the compound effect. It's the 13 years of doing Instagram and doing social media that led to that one, really powerful moment of monetization. And so I think that's the thing. When you first start doing something, you're actually cashing in on something you've been doing for a long time. So for the person who is not prospecting, right? But yet they are posting on social media, here and there, occasionally on Facebook, Instagram for like a couple of years. All of a sudden you start posting motivational stuff and you get a lot of people that reach out. That doesn't sustain usually because you're basically cashing in on the last 3 years of value for one ask. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
Can you give me your perspective on that? Because I think that's the problem, right? Just because you had one training that's super successful doesn't mean you're going to keep getting 400 people. That was like those people have been waiting for 13 years to see some sort of online paid transaction, Yeah.
I think from my perspective, it's a little bit different. When you're the one who's posting motivational stuff in your friend group, I think it's great up until it's too much feedback for the people that are liking it. That was my experience of like a lot of people like, oh, you're doing amazing things. And then it became like, oh, so now you're that guy though. Like you're the podcast speaker guy. And I think a lot of people are afraid to, I don't want to say a lot of people are afraid to support that, but in a weird way, what we do, I mean, we've had people say like, oh, you're going to this event, is that like a cult? right?
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot of people out there that still think
To one of our events.
Yeah, one of our events.
Yeah.
There's still a lot of people out there who think this is like woo-woo, or personal development is like a cult. And like, what do you mean you're going to talk to yourself in the mirror about how great you are and all that?
Right.
So I do think that, yeah, there's people there in the beginning, but when you really lean into it and it kind of gets old and people realize like, oh, this isn't a fad, like you're going all in on this.
Yeah.
And then you don't get results for 5 to 10 years, people tend to be like, well, that's clearly not working for you.
Right.
That's my take on it. Like, when it's new and exciting, of course everybody's going to support you.
Exactly.
But when crap hits the fan and you're, 2, 3, 4, 5 years into your journey and you realize, or they realize, like, you don't have the house, you don't have the car, you don't have, 20 million listens, or if you're in business, you don't have $20 million or 1,000 clients, or you don't have a storefront, whatever it may be.
Right.
I think that's when reality kind of pokes through for people. It's very interesting.
It is. Here's another analogy as well. So early on, I worked with someone who was very, very overweight, and he went from 360 pounds down to 220 pounds, which I believe is what, 140 pounds? Something like
I don't
that? Or
remember the
no,
numbers.
240 pounds. Yes, that's 120 pounds. And I remember actually telling people, like, this person lost 120 pounds. Like, that's amazing. And it is. But the first 40 pounds of that, he was getting affirmations everywhere. Because when you're losing 40 pounds, everybody's excited for you. So think about it this way. Going from 360 down to 300 is like a drastic amount of weight in a very short amount of time, and everybody's like, holy crap, what a transformation. But going from losing 115 pounds to losing 120, that's 5 pounds, right? That's not that big of a deal, quote unquote. In the long run, that's a huge deal for anyone who has high awareness, because it's way easier to lose that first 40. Going from 360 to 320, those first 40 pounds is way easier than going from losing 120 pounds to losing 130 pounds. Those last 10 pounds are so much harder than those first 40. And you understand that, right? So we might applaud those last 10 pounds just as much as those first 40, but the world doesn't necessarily know that.
Yeah, and I think the other thing, and it's not really related to that, but it could be, I don't remember where I heard this, but people want to see you win as long as you're not winning bigger than they are.
Right.
And I do think that
There's some truth to that, yeah.
I think as much as people try to be, they want everybody to win equally, I think at the end of the day, let's do this. If you're a podcaster, maybe you look up to us, right? And you say like, oh, you guys are, 535 episodes. That's amazing. Like, I look up to you guys. I want to be there one day. The other side of that is like, maybe you don't want to see us succeed because it's too much feedback, or it's too much contrast, or
You're probably not listening to the show if that's the case.
Or maybe you did once and you decided, oh, I don't want to see these guys win. I don't want to be part of that.
Right.
I do think that it's the chasm, right?
Yeah.
Like, you can make it, you can start, and then there's this long period where nobody knows your name. You don't really have a ton of results. You're wondering what you're doing or if it's working, and then eventually, so what I told Alan when I said, like, let's do this episode, you start off with 5 to 15 people who support what you're doing. You'll have some that stick around, the true few. Then you'll have 10 years where nobody really cares that much.
Right.
And then you'll have 1 year where you have 1 million people that love you.
Right.
It's just this weird thing. It's this weird thing. I think it was, who was it? Steve Martin, the guy that was in Cheaper by the Dozen.
Mm-hmm.
I was listening to something by him, and he basically said 10 years where nobody knew my name.
Yep.
4 years of, like, going back to the drawing board, getting better, and then 4 years of wild fame. Like, that's basically what he said his journey was. For 10 years, nobody had any idea who he was. He was broke, like, doing the entrepreneur, comedian, actor thing where you just kind of couch surf until you make it.
Right.
Right? But nobody knows that. So it's interesting.
I heard an interview by Bill Burr on Tim Ferriss's show, and Bill Burr talked about how he didn't become Bill Burr, until he was in his 40s. You know what I mean? And it's just interesting, you hear Kevin Hart, same deal, 13 years hearing no until eventually everybody said yes. Matthew McConaughey, you can study these people's real life. There's something called a survival bias, and the problem is none of us are seeing the chasm.
Right.
So think about someone who you think is even if you're listening to Kevin, if you started listening to Kevin and I within the last 3 months, you didn't see a lot of the chasm.
Yeah.
You're seeing us now. I mean, and I think that's the problem. It's like Tom Brady's a good example of that. There's so many people that are a good example of that. And Dave Meltzer talks about this a lot it took me 17 years to become an overnight success. And it's, and then there's that quote that John Maxwell says, I worked hard all my life to become an overnight success. It's interesting, man. It's interesting. You can think of anyone who, even Gary Vee. No one knew who Gary Vee was 6 years ago. Nobody. Almost nobody, I should say. Some people did. The true few did, right? But there's a compound effect, and we're going to do another episode later this week, or that'll be dropping Monday, but it's about the compound effect, and it's about why that is. Why is overnight success the thing, right? It's not like even Justin Bieber at 13. How long was he doing piano and singing? Probably at least 5 years, when he was a kid, right? So you just have to understand that at the beginning of every journey, just remember, when you start losing weight, everybody's going to be like, hell yeah, that's awesome. But when you become the fitness guy, it's going to get old. I dealt with that too. It's like, oh, you're so positive, you're so inspirational, you're so incredible. And then it's like, oh, you're a podcaster now? Oh, now you're a bodybuilder. So now you're actually like a bodybuilder. You're going to do fitness shows, really? Like, it's just interesting, And here's what I want to really try to drive home. If you're being like that, this is just human biases, okay? At the beginning of anyone's journey, you want to support them. You like, oh, I want to lose 20 pounds in 2021. Great. Hell yeah, that's awesome. Like, hell yeah. But no one's talking about that 3 months in. Some of the people are still grinding, still at the gym, still working hard, but people aren't talking about it necessarily. And so I think it's really important to understand that, and I'll just use podcasting as a quick analogy here. At the beginning of your podcast, if you were to start a podcast, I can tell you for certain that your first 3 episodes will get more listens than your 4, 5, and 6. Guaranteed.
Number one will
always be the most. Yeah, because it's brand new. And if you start seeing number 1 hit really high, I remember Emilia and Bianca. I've looked at their numbers, obviously, and Emilia and B have had a really good out of the gate. Really good. Why? Because they've been adding a lot of value online. A lot of people know them, like them, trust them. Like their whole life of building relationships. Now all of those are potential listeners. Holy crap! They're starting a show. Let me at least check it out. Right? Many people want to check it out to see what it's about. Not a lot of people want to stick around. That's okay. Their first 3 episodes are probably still their highest hitters. That's okay. That's okay. Keep grinding.
And I think at the end of the day, this is why it's so important to do something you love.
Right.
I think that we can always go back to that of like, look, you guys are seeing, again, like Alan said, if you just started listening to us this week, hypothetically, you're listening to episode number 534. 534. We've done this 533 other times where maybe it wasn't great. Maybe our lives weren't going great. Maybe we're going through a breakup. Maybe we were broke. Like that's the thing.
Right.
The interesting thing is you only see the people who make it. You don't see the musician who couch surfed for 30 years and didn't make it.
I know.
You don't see that. You only see the people that make it. Gary Vee didn't make it, I believe, until he was 34.
Yeah. So it took him 13 years to make it, quote unquote, where he was posting on social media every single day for 13 years before he became basically Gary Vee, and then people started to really know him, and he talks about that, it's, and he basically said this, he said, I didn't say a word to the world about anything business for 15 years. So his dad owned a wine company, beer and liquor company, and liquor store. And he worked as an entrepreneur for like 15 years before he ever talked about entrepreneurship. Dude, we're only 4.5, 5 years into this journey. You know what I mean? It's like, imagine 15 years in, you might see us and think we're like Gary Vee. It's a journey. It's not. You just have to understand. You have to be aware. I never knew who Gary Vee was until 3.5 years ago. Genuinely.
Same.
And and most of his followers, most of the people that now know of Gary Vee, 80% of them was within the last year. It's a prolific thing. It's an interesting thing. Joe Rogan, no one knew his name 15 years ago. It's just now the whole world does. It's just you have to know that.
Yeah, it's a long game.
It's a long game.
It's a long game. I always tell our podcast clients that, like, look, it doesn't matter right now. Like, all of the stuff matters, but if we don't keep doing what we're doing, it doesn't matter. Right. I don't care how many episodes your first one gets, because our first one probably gets 6 downloads at the beginning of time. Yeah. So it's super important. But I think it's important for you guys to understand that too. Like, you're going to have people that drop off. It's okay. If you love what you're doing and you can love the process, I think that's what matters, because you're going to be far more likely to succeed. If we didn't love podcasting, we would have quit a long time ago.
Oh, for sure.
Or we wouldn't have started.
Right.
We wouldn't have started to begin with. So I would say this. Your one takeaway, I want to give you a tactic, but it's hard.
What's an action?
It's almost like your action is plant your flag as this is who I'm going to become, and this is what I'm going to do. We've planted our flag as the podcast guys. We've planted our flag. This is a little behind the scenes quickly. Evan Carmichael on one of our coaching calls told us to change the name. And we said, yeah, he's probably right. Hyperconscious. We have a cartoon. It is what it is. It's probably time to change. I was DMing Evan back and forth saying, hey, we're doing Next Level University. And he's like, nah, it's not the one. And you and I had conversations, and I was like, oh, Evan doesn't like it. We're going to have to change it. And we ended up talking back and forth, and we ended up saying, like, we're going to plant our flag. I texted Evan and said, we're planting our flag with Next Level U. Like, we're not changing it. That's where we're going. And now we are however many episodes later, but we plant your flag in whatever it is you want, and don't let people fall off. Don't let that break you.
Right.
Understand that it's going to happen. People have their own lives. Right. At the end of the day, like, they're doing their own thing, so don't be surprised if they're not 1,000,000% supportive of you.
And here's a really great example, and then we'll go. If you don't even know what the Hyperconscious podcast is, and you're listening right now, this is a perfect example. I want everyone listening to really think about this. 2 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 15 years from now, most of our listeners will not know that the Hyperconscious podcast ever existed. Most of our listeners. Yeah. Why? Because we're gaining more listeners now than we ever have, because the train's been rolling longer than it ever has. Some of you out there listening don't even know that the Hyperconscious podcast existed. That's what we started. Next Level University is the survival part of it. You can't look at the Hyperconscious podcast and Next Level University and think of them separately. If Kevin and I were to stop podcasting today and never podcast again, most of the world would not know we were ever podcasters.
Yeah.
It's just a trip. So think about that when you start your journey. And if you're not clear on what you want to go all in on, at least go all in, and maybe it is your thing. Just don't live this half and half life of, I don't know if I want to go all in. It's just a mistake.
I concur. Ladies and gentlemen, if you are looking to start a podcast in 2021, Alan and I have been taking on more and more clients. Next Level Podcast Solutions is really growing. We're building the landing page now, so you guys will be able to find out more information. But no matter where you are, there's a next level in your podcast. Maybe for you, it's having the vision of one. We can help you start it. Maybe you want to monetize it. We can help you do that, get better guests, all of that stuff. 535 episodes of our own show. We've done 800 total between the other shows. So we can help you guys. Just reach out to either one of us, and all the info is in the show notes.
If you look at the most successful companies in the world, Amazon, Google, Facebook, LinkedIn, all of those, they all have one thing in common. They've added more value online. The future is digital. If you want to add massive value online and grow an online podcast or business, we are going to be able to help you. I'm going to do a lot of the helping you make money, monetizing, coaching, vision. Kevin's going to help you start the actual podcast and the tactics and the logistics. We wish we had us early in our journey. Things would be very different now if we did. So please reach out.
Please reach out. Ladies and gentlemen, we hope you enjoyed this. Next episode, 535. We are going to talk about the one thing you must understand before you start your journey. We have had a lot of new awarenesses between our calls with Dave and our own experiences with clients, ourselves, and loved ones. So we are going to share a very, very important thing with you that you need to take with you. We hope you enjoyed, and as always, we don't have fans, we have family.
Talk to you soon.
Bye.